Okay, no-code pipelines in Opsera. I'm Ed Slatt. I'm a sales engineer in Opsera, and today I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes going through how to create pipelines from scratch in Opsera. This is the third video in a series that's walking through setting up a code-to-cloud capability in our platform. In the first video, we registered existing tools intended to support the fulfillment portfolio, DevOps automation. In the second video, we had Opsera spin up tools for us so that we don't have to be responsible for patching those tools and keeping them available. And now we're going to use those tools to build a container from node code and deploy it to a Kubernetes cluster. This is the pipelines user interface. We're going to create a new pipeline and we're going to start from a blank template. So this isn't the normal use of our tool. Typically, you would have a template on the shelf and your users would create a pipeline from that template and they would have all this work done for them already. But we want to start on the ground today with nothing. So we'll say new pipeline. It's going to be an SDLC pipeline. I'm going to use the blank template and we're going to call it order flow. So this is going to be one of the microservices in our fulfillment portfolio. So I'm going to create this pipeline. We're looking at the summary tab, and this is where your pipeline logs will run when it runs, what will land when it runs. There's nothing in here so far because it hasn't run yet. So we'll go over to the workflow tab, which is a graphical representation of the automation. And we see that we have one token step here that hasn't been configured yet. So each one of these steps is going to be a different piece of the automation. To start from the ground here, we're going to have a very simple pipeline. It's going to have 3 steps. It's going to build a container from node code. That's the first step. The second step is going to push that container to Amazon's ECR, the container registry. And then the third step is going to deploy it to EKS, to the Amazon's Kubernetes service. So to do that, we're going to start by laying down the blocks, saying what the blocks are, telling the system what the different blocks are, and then configuring the blocks using drop-down widgets and things like that. So we're going to get into architectural edit mode by hitting this edit workflow button. We're going to add 2 more steps because we only have 1 right now. We started with 1, so now we have 2. And now we'll come in here and we'll tell Opsera what type of step each of these is going to be, so that Opsera can populate it with the configuration elements appropriate for the step. So for instance, the middle step that pushes to ECR is going to need AWS credentials. So after we tell it it's a Docker push to ECR, it's going to have a drop-down widget that tells you how to specify your AWS credentials. So the first one we're going to configure, we're going to say what it is. So I'll use this pencil icon over here, step setup. And we're going to name this Docker build. And the tool we're going to use is a Jenkins tool. So because we're going to use Jenkins to do this Docker build. So I will save it. It's going to auto configure a tag for me that we can use later on to tune our insights. So I'll just say proceed. And in that way, we set the first step to a Docker build type step. So now we're going to do the second one. We're going to edit it. We're going to call this one Docker push. The tool is going to be an ECR push. So Docker ECR push. We'll save it, accept the unique tag. And then finally, we're going to use our deploy. So we're going to call this one Argo deploy. Argo is a GitOps engine that we're going to use here for getting things, containers out to Kubernetes. The tool is going to be Argo. And we'll save that. So now we're finished with that architectural edit mode. We'll say done editing. And now each of these steps knows what kind of step it is. And now we'll go ahead and configure each of these. So we'll start with the startup workflow box here at the top. We'll use the gear icon here to configure it. And we're going to say our repo is in GitHub. So it's in a repo called order flow in GitHub. So I'll say GitHub. I'm going to use that fulfillment account. This is the GitHub tool that we registered previously. The repo is order flow. So I'll start typing order and it's going to thin down everything this tool has access to just those repos that have order in the name. There's our GitOps repo. The Argo order flow is the GitOps repo. I want to select the code repo and the primary branch is going to be the main branch. And then we're going to go over here to webhook. So we want this automation to run when commits hit the main branch. So we'll turn on the webhook and we'll ask Opsera to go ahead and configure that webhook with GitHub. So we'll hit that register button and all that will get taken care of for us. So the next piece we're going to configure is the Docker build step. So I'll say configure. I'm going to go ahead and select the Jenkins tool. We spun up tools previously in the previous video. So I'm going to grab a tool that Opsera is hosting for me. It's called C2C Jenkins. This is going to be an Opsera managed jobs. We can have a couple different types of jobs, including custom jobs that are just on your Jenkins instance. But in this case, this is a simple Docker build. We're going to use an Opsera managed job and the job is a Docker build job. The account is how Jenkins gets access to that code. We're going to to use the fulfillment account. We're going to select the repo. We're going to select the branch. We're going to name the Docker, the container that comes out, order-flow, and we're going to use dynamic tagging. And we're going to tag the container image with the commit SHA that comes off of the repo. I will save that, and now we have that Docker build step buttoned up. The next piece we'll do here is the Docker push step. So I'll open this up. Again, we'll select that same C2C Jenkins, code to cloud Jenkins. We'll use the Docker push job. Now here's where we specify our AWS credentials. So I'll go ahead and we already registered an AWS tool called fulfillment. Now we have to point back to the step where the container comes from. That's the Docker build step. And we're going to use an existing container registry. So I'll turn that on. It's going to populate this list with registries that exist in AWS. So I'll select that, and we're going to push this to the code to cloud container registry. So we'll save that, and that buttons up our Docker push job. And now the last one we have to configure is the Argo deploy. Let's open that up. We're going to grab that C2C tool that Argo is running for us, or excuse me, that Opsera is running for us. Now we have an application that we already configured with Argo called C2C order flow. So we'll select that. We have to select our Docker push step, and now we have to specify the repo that's going to be used for the GitOps piece. So that repo is in GitHub. We're going to use the the fulfillment account again. We'll thin this list by order, and this time we'll take the Argo repo. This is where that deployment YAML sits. We're going to use the main branch, and the deployment YAML sits in a file called in the YAML directory called deployment YAML. So we will save that. So now we've configured, we've set each step to what it is. We've configured each step to make it specific for this microservice. Now let's go change the code and fire that webhook and see all of this work. So let's open up GitHub. Now we're in GitHub. This is the repo that's being that has the webhook. Let's open up the IDE, the GitHub embedded IDE. Now let's go make a change that we'll be able to see. So right there in the main page, it's going to say order flow, code to cloud. Let's add something here that says fulfillment portfolio, code to cloud. And let's add a timestamp here. So let's say 2113. We will commit this. Give it a commit message here. We'll commit it. So since we're in the web-based IDE at GitHub, when we do that commit, it lands right on the server, and that will fire the webhook that starts our automation. So we'll come back to our pipeline. We'll go over to the summary tab, and we'll see momentarily this gets kicked. Okay, so the webhook fired. We see that here at the bottom of our logs, and the first step has started. The Docker build is running now. Okay, we see the Docker build step is finished successfully. This line item here is the console output. We can actually open that up and look at the standard out for the build and make sure that checks out. Looks like what we expected. And the Docker push step has started. All right, the Docker push step finished. Everything looks good over here. We see all these success and running green indicators, so everything looks good. And the Argo step has started. Okay, at this point, we see that Argo finished successfully, and now we can go browse the endpoint in Kubernetes and see that code that we changed get rendered. So I'll open a new tab here, and we'll paste that URL in it. You can see that this URL is for a EKS endpoint, and there it is, our code change, fulfillment portfolio, code to cloud 2113. So let's stop here. In the next video, we'll add some scanners, some approvals, and we'll configure some things to show you how we help you shift left.